All right, before we start today's episode, I just want to start out by thanking all the listeners of this podcast. And I encourage you to subscribe, hit download, tell your friends and family, leave a review, leave whatever star review you feel is this podcast is worth. Leave a verbal review if you're in a place like on the Apple app, the podcast app, or on YouTube, or wherever you can. I know not all the places that you get podcasts let you leave a review, but if you can do a review, I'd appreciate it. It helps boost us up in the algorithms and get more noticed. And if you're, I definitely got to give a big shout out and recognize the Patreon subscribers who financially support this podcast. And if you are interested in learning more about that, head over to patreon.com/bigtruth. And there's 4 different tiers of support, and you can sign up. They all have their own little exclusive benefits and privileges. So check it out at patreon.com/bigtruth. And if you're looking for old or new bike parts, if you're looking for any bike parts or motorcycle gear, riding gear, whatnot, check out Old Bike Barn at oldbikebarn.com, on Instagram and Facebook and all that, at Old Bike Barn. They got whatever you need, whether you're building a chopper, a cafe racer, stock bike, for your Harley, or especially if you got an old vintage Japanese motorcycle. They have a lot of stuff that other people don't have for your old Honda CB50s and all that stuff. Sorry, CB500s. Or your CB650s or 750s, whatever. But Yamaha, your XS 650s, all that stuff. So check them out, oldbikebarn.com. And if you have been looking to get into trying some CBD oil because you're having trouble sleeping, or you got inflammation or soreness, or gym recovery stuff, whatnot, check out crystallakeclear.com. They got super high grade CBD oil. I've been taking the mint chocolate one at night and sleeping like a baby. So check them out at crystallakeclear.com. If you got a filthy phallus or a dirty dingus or a hairy Harry, whatever you want to say, you need to check out manscaped.com, because summer is coming. It's going to be hot out, humid out, and you need to get the situation under control down there. You want a nice, clean, cool area. You don't need a freaking grungy, mangy, stinky swamp down there. So check out manscaped.com. They got a device called the Lawnmower 3.0. That's a special razor developed just for shaving your nether regions and private areas and sensitive spots. They got these special ceramic blades that do not cut, nick, or scratch down there unless you go at it like a fucking savage. So, just take it easy, take your time, do things right, and you will not have blood on your fingertips, and you'll be happy for it, and your partner will be very happy for it. And when summer comes, it'll be having like a little air conditioner down there. So check them out, manscaped.com. Use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout. Get 20% off your order and free shipping. So even you know what I mean? And they got all kinds of package deals and stuff going on, and you save 20% even off that. So manscaped.com, use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout. You get 20% off your order. And if you happen to be in the unfortunate situation where you get into a motorcycle accident, you need to check out lawtigers.com. They are a motorcycle law firm that specialize in accidents and motorcycle accidents. And they are, it was a law firm founded by riders for motorcycle riders. And if you, you can go to lawtigers.com and get all their information, or go to Facebook and type in Law Tigers in the state you're in. So for here, like we type in Law Tigers, Massachusetts, and it'll bring up the local office. So you get in touch with someone more local in your regional office of Law Tigers, because they're all over the country. So you definitely want to check them out. Hope you never need to use that sponsor, but if you do get in an accident, hit them up. They're going to hook you up and take care of you. And, if you're looking for some clothing, you need to check out Omerta. They got a new collabo coming out with The Business, one of my favorite old British oi bands. That homeboy Mick from Australia drew up for them. So you need to check that out. They also have a whole line of, streetwear, street apparel. And whether you're looking for a hoodie, a shirt, jacket, socks, whatever, they use American-made apparel whenever they can, and all their screen printing is done in-house. It's a truly DIY operation with a far reach. You need to check them out, omertamia.com, on Instagram and Facebook at omertamia. And again, over there, use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout. You will get 20% off your order. Oh, and I forgot to mention, at Crater Lake Clear, use the promo code Big Truth at checkout, and I think it's either 20 or 25% off your order. So just when you go to checkout, make sure you hit Big Truth. I can't believe I forgot to say that, because I'm trying to save you money wherever I can, and I got rad sponsors that are down with the program, and they want to save you money too. So, check all these guys out. And if you're into like the occult or paranormal or serial killers or vans, meaning vans like the driving van, like 70s show vans, psychedelics in general, or psychedelic light shows or choppers, all that antisocial stuff, you need to check out my man Zach's clothing company called Heavy. You can check them out at heavy.big.cartel.com. Let me say that one more time without totally butchering it. I'm hiccuping, sorry. Heavy.bigcartel.com, or on Instagram at Heavy Clothing. They got all the stuff you need. Rad clothing company. They also have an assortment of antisocial and drug paraphernalia products. If you really need some, if you're into motorcycles in general, building choppers, riding bikes, whatever you're into, you need to check out Chop Cult. They are the biggest online information resource for that, an online community for motorcycle riders and chopper builders and whatnot. So check them out at chopcult.com. You can sign up on their message boards. It's free. And all those message boards, it's all broken up by different topics. Wicked easy to navigate. Costs you nothing to join, and they don't ask for your credit card or nothing sketchy, but they got an online swap meet where you can buy, sell, trade parts. They got a like a events page where you can see motorcycle related events all across the country and all across the world. They have an email list where they'll send like digests out to you, like weekly digests. They got everything going on over there. So check them out at chopcult.com and at all social medias, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, blah, 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 at chopcult. pitchforkny.com. You need to check them out, especially if you're in a punk rock, heavy metal, or hardcore, and you're looking for some new gear, because they are a mainstay in those music genres and supply so many people with fucking rad gear. My man Warren and company. They also got a little a record label that they're doing with this it's kind of like back to school series where they're putting out these split 7 inches from different artists all across the country. They got an East Coast band on one side and a West Coast band on the other, and it's been bands like Murphy's Law, Rancid, Sick of It All, The Eulogy, all kinds of stuff. So check it out. Pitchforkny.com and on Instagram at pitchforkny. And last but not least, Chopperhead Custom Cycles, my bike shop. Check us out. We got an online web store where we sell parts and apparel. But beyond that, because that's where a lot of places stop, we are a full service motorcycle brick and mortar shop. So you can come in. We got a parts counter, a showroom. We got an area with all the helmets and whatnot. You can try shit on. We stock Biltwell, Simpson, Bell. Whatever you need. We get the half helmets, whatever you need. So come in, because spring's coming and you need to get geared up, and you need stuff for your bike. And if you don't do the work yourself, we can do the work. We do everything from oil changes to full custom chopper builds. So check us out, chopperhead.com. If you don't see it on the website, because I don't do the as good of a job as I do in updating and putting everything we carry on the website, but we're pretty much set up with everyone. So if you need a thunderheader, you need a TTS tuner, whatever you need, we got it. You need some crazy bars, if we don't got it, and we'll make it, So whatever you need, give us a call at chopperhead.com or shoot us an email, or give us a call at 508-995-6764. And if you're in the area, stop on by 13 County Road, East Freetown, Massachusetts. Last but not least, check out BigTruthPodcast.com for more information on the show and to see all the back episodes. And, or this is also available, as you know, wherever you listen to podcasts. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode right now, because I can tell you, dudes and gals and everyone listening, this one is going to be a gripper.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes, once again, we have liftoff. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Big Truth Podcast. And today I got Matthew Roberts on, who's author of a book that came out last year called Initiated. Just so everyone knows, this is one I've been looking forward to for a while. And Matthew, just to talk about synchronicity, the principles of synchronicity really quick. I had ordered your book. I had started reading it. And then something... I don't really go on Reddit that much, but I popped in because I got a notification about like an update to a group, and it just happened to be you talking about a little bit about your book and kind of being, hey, does anyone have any questions? And I reached out to you, and then literally you got back to me like that night or the next day, and it was just like all kind of came together at once, and then now here we are.
Yes.
Yeah, so, it's just kind of, bizarre, not a bizarre thing, but, things happen and along a timeline or whatever it is, and for a reason. But so I'm stoked to have you today. If you're not familiar with Matthew's story, he was a naval vet, 16-year veteran. He also you were a cryptographer for the Navy.
Yeah. So I spent a total of 16 years in the Navy, and the entire time I was a cryptologist.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's, kind of a subset of intelligence. So that's what I did for 16 years. I worked in naval intelligence.
Yeah. And then, so some of you may be familiar with, in 2015, there was a incident filmed by some naval pilots, and some people call it the Gimbal incident or the Go Fast. And there was a U.F.O. or UAP type experience. And, the Pentagon, those are two of the footages that the Pentagon released not too long ago. And you were on the USS Roosevelt at the time that the Gimbal and Go Fast footage was recorded.
Yes, that's right. I was stationed on the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2015, and I was present for those events. And I'll kind of get into that story a little bit if you'd like. So we were, off the coast of Florida doing our workup cycle for deployment. And basically that's just, where we go out on the ship and we prepare for deployment, and they put us in different scenarios to see how we'll react to that scenario. And, it's a whole tested evolution. So you get graded based on, how well you reacted to a certain situation or a scenario that they put you in. And this, is like a month-long thing, so from the time you wake up in the morning when the clock starts to a month later when the clock ends, you're in this constant, training environment 24 hours a day where they just kind of throw things at you. And so, we were at the end of that. We were at the end of that training cycle, and that was when the ship encountered these objects in the sky, and they were recorded on F-18 gun cameras. And so that was my first exposure in 2015 to what is now called the Gimbal footage.
Yeah.
And the Go Fast footage was also captured around the same time.
Now, did people? I mean, and I know some of this is probably stuff you can or can't talk about, but at that time, was that footage when those pilots filmed that, was that widely known on the ship, or did you guys not really know about it or hear about it? And was that did people just think it was part of the training, like where they were just trying to throw you guys for a loop? Like what was kind of the thought of that stuff when it occurred?
So, I mean, when it occurred, we had finished the training evolution, and I was actually sitting around waiting to be debriefed on our grade. How well my shop had performed. So I was just sitting around kind of waiting for that when a friend of mine from another part, who also works in intelligence but works in a different shop, he came in and said, "Hey, check this out." So I sat down at my computer and I pulled it up and I watched, what is now known as the Gimbal and Go Fast footage on my screen. And so that was my first time seeing it, was back in 2015. Other people on the ship, I don't think were aware that any of this was happening.
Yeah.
But obviously, because my job was very much behind closed doors and it was all classified. So I dealt with classified things all day long. And so that's why I kind of had access to this. And the rest of the people on the ship, I think, for the most part, were unaware that anything was happening, to be honest.
Yeah, so because when the pilots came back, it wasn't like everyone was like, "Whoa, what the hell happened?" It was more like that stuff became like, shh, because it was classified, and then later it ended up getting leaked, and then at some point the Pentagon, was it last year or whatever, the Pentagon ended up just acknowledging it, and which was kind of like a historical type event, for them to even acknowledge that.
Yeah, it was, and so I'll go into how all of that happened too, from my perspective anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
So I after this event in 2015, I kind of just put this in the back of my head a little bit, because I thought, if this is real, and these, all this UFO stuff is real, I clearly am not read into whatever program deals with that, so I'll never know,
Sure.
So I kind of left it at that. We went on our around the world deployment. And then I transferred to the Office of Naval Intelligence in Washington, D.C. And that's where things really started to kind of pick up for me. So,
sure.
I had this medical emergency, and I was at home recovering from that when my brother texted me, and he said, there was this article in the New York Times, and there's footage, you should check it out. So, I clicked on the links he sent me, and I read the article and I watched the footage, and, my heart just kind of sank into my stomach, because, here I was now watching on my telephone footage that I had seen first behind closed doors in 2015.
Yeah.
And people aren't really familiar with how classified things work and how it works to live in this world where everything you do is classified. But that was a huge shock for me to see that, because, I couldn't have imagined any scenario back in 2015 where I would have been able to watch this footage on my cell phone in public. So that was kind of shocking.
Yeah.
And I never talked to my family about, the nature of my job and the things that I did. So the thought of talking to my brother about this was kind of a little bit horrifying to me,
Yeah.
And I knew he would be calling me any minute. So I kind of, I was in a panic, really. And I did not want to have this conversation with him at all. But he did call me, and he said, the first thing he said was, have you ever encountered anything like this? And I kind of choked a little bit, And I started thinking to myself, can I talk about this now? I mean, it's all out there in the public. The New York Times is talking about it. And so I started thinking, and also, the Senator Harry Reid is quoted in the article, and he was a former Senate Majority Leader.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe I can talk about this. So I told my brother, I was there when this happened. And he was a little shocked by that. I think that was an answer that he wasn't really prepared to hear.
Sure.
And so, he went quiet for a few days after that.
Yeah. And just for a little bit of background on this, I know this from your book, and we'll get into the things that started happening after that and how you've processed it. But like, you're coming at this from a perspective where like you said, you weren't like a UFO guy or a believer guy, and, kind of an atheist background and a scientific background. And like you said, and like your father was an astronomer, grandfather was worked for NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you weren't coming from a perspective like where this was stuff you were even kind of really thinking about. So it must have been, like kind of like, how did that hit you when, when you first saw the footage back in 2015, and then when you see that it's been released and acknowledged by the government, like, and what's your take on why they even kind of acknowledged it?
So I can't speak for that. I don't know why. Well, I can guess, but it's just a guess as to why they've decided to do this. And I don't know, maybe you want to have that conversation a little bit later when we start to get into the consciousness aspect of this. But
okay,
I really think that's the whole consciousness component to this I think is the reason why it's coming out.
Okay. Yeah. We can definitely fit that in where you feel like it fits in better in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it just must have been, kind of crazy for you that it's like all this classified stuff's coming out. And then, when did, the next kind of phase, for lack of a better term, kind of kick in for you? When did you start having, more experiences, and when did things start, picking up or getting weird for you?
So, when I read the article in New York Times, they mentioned a group that Tom DeLonge, the singer of Angels and Airwaves and Blink-182, he had founded this group to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. And so, being the very grounded and analytical type mind that I am, I thought, well, if I want to get to the bottom of this, let me see if any of these individuals wrote any books, and what are they saying about it? So I went on and I read, Tom DeLonge has a few books out. He's got a couple of series books out. I read those, and Jacques Vallée had written a foreword to some of those books. So I looked into some of Jacques Vallée's work. There was a doctor on the staff, Dr. Colm Kelleher, who wrote a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker. And it's all about Skinwalker Ranch, which now there's a television show dedicated to that. So I read that. And these books were they were so bizarre to me because they seemed to speak to there being like a whole paranormal or consciousness aspect to this, which I didn't really understand. Because like you said, growing up, I grew up in a very scientific household. We never went to church. I was an atheist. If science couldn't prove it, then it didn't exist, Yeah. So that's kind of the background that I was coming from. And in fact, and I've said this before, that, when I would see a television show come on, and it was somebody talking about an abduction experience or, seeing UFOs, I kind of rolled my eyes, and changed the channel because I thought it was just so out there,
Yeah.
But then here I was, faced with this, from these books and stuff that I had been reading. So I thought to myself, maybe all that stuff isn't just hocus pocus tinfoil hat stuff. Maybe there is something there. And so that, of course, started me on this path that gets a little crazy, to be honest.
Yeah. So, like I said, I've read a good, probably half to 3/4 of your book. So I saw a little bit of your path, man. Like, and it's a lot. It's a wild and weird and story,
Yeah. And I that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because all of this stuff does seem kind of out there. But when you have someone telling it who spent 16 years in naval intelligence, someone who's grounded in reality, someone who is credible.
Yeah.
You know, I've never done drugs. I don't even drink.
Sure.
You know, so there's no way anybody can claim that I was hallucinating.
Yeah.
You know,
and not to mention just, you know, and I know it's probably something you can't talk about or whatnot, but I can't imagine what the vetting process is like to become a cryptologist and work for naval intelligence. Like, they're not going to just let, you know, someone that's kind of like not 100% grounded, you know, in those types of positions, I would assume.
Oh yeah. I mean, the screening process for this a job in intelligence period is very rigorous. So there's when I first went to go get my clearance, there's this, you know, I don't know how many pages. It must have been 100 pages of questions they ask you. They'll ask you, you know, where have you lived for the past 10 years? Where have you gone to school for the past 10 years? They'll ask you for contacts of people you know. And they will actually go back 10 years, and they will go back to some place you lived 10 years ago, and they'll knock on your neighbor's door and say, oh, you know, this guy, he lived next door to you for 10 years ago. What was he like?
Yeah.
You know, they went as far back as to interview elementary school teachers of mine.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that they take lightly,
Sure.
you know, and if there was anything untoward in my past, they would have found that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's probably a good psychological test, psychological or personality testing component to it as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, they interview you, they sit there and they watch you and they evaluate you. It's rigorous, and they won't just let anybody do it.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. And that's what makes, you know, your book, like in the experiences that you came forward with, so amazing, because it's not like someone you can just dismiss. Because, you know, that's the problem, is a lot of times where people have come out with books or stories or about, you know, these types of experiences, whatever the experiences are, people are quick to dismiss, like, oh, it must just be some wacky dude or whatever. Like, can't really do that, you know, with someone with a level of credibility as yourself.
Right. Yeah, and that's primarily the reason why I came forward, because I knew that I had to lend credibility to that conversation, you know, because this is a conversation that needs to be had.
Absolutely. So the you know, your brother calls you, tells you about, you know, hey, you ever see this stuff? And you go, and now you're looking on YouTube and seeing the stuff that was classified that you saw a few years earlier, that, you know, was behind closed doors. You said kind of pit in your stomach, you know, just because of, you know, all this, you know, I'm sure it's kind of a big, like, you know, what do I do with this, you know? And then not too long after that, you know, you transfer over to D.C. and then things start happening. Like, how did things first start happening for you? And I know, you know, at some point, you know, you realize things happen, you know, more when you were a kid as well. But like, you know, the next part of the story here is, you know, this whole series of events starts unfolding in front of you. Like how did that kind of kick off, I guess, for lack of a better?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, it became a very paranormal experience, really. So I was sitting in my truck one night, and I had been reading all of these books, and from an analytical standpoint, in my own mind, I had reached the end of the road. You know. Yeah.
So a quick question before we even go there, and I don't mean to interrupt, but from your perspective, like, given your background, and then you had this experience with seeing this footage, and then you start reading up on it. What was your impression of what you were reading? Were you at that point where you were like, hey, some of this actually could be interesting? Or were you saying, nah, you know, these guys might be a little wacky or something?
No, you know, Colm Kelleher's book, it talks about some pretty extraordinary things that had happened on Skinwalker Ranch. And I didn't really think that any of that was nonsense, you know, because the source for me was this group that was associated with the Pentagon. So I didn't look at that and say, well, you know, that's just too out there, because for me, it was a credible source. So I said, well, you know, maybe this stuff has really happened. And honestly, I found it a little bit creepy. And I think anybody would in reading that kind of stuff. I mean, there's one incident where it talks about a woman, the mother, she comes home, when this ranch was privately owned, she comes home with some groceries. She puts them away and then goes to the bathroom and comes back, and the groceries are all back in the bags on the counter. And this seems like Ghostbusters type stuff, things that you just see in the movies. But you have this Dr. Colm Kelleher that's writing about it, and so you kind of have to lend it some kind of credibility and take it seriously.
Sure, yeah. And the thing about the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, I know a little bit about it, not a ton, but it just seems the amount of different kind of phenomena or activities that are happening there, it's like a pretty wide breadth. You have things like that like people could say is like, oh, is that like ghost stuff? Or you got like, bulletproof wolves and stuff like, like there's like mythical creatures. There's all kinds of phenomena happening there at once, that's been written about, so it's interesting that there's so many different things happening there. But it's kind of like you, when things started happening, there wasn't just like, you didn't experience like, the typical, abduction type scenario that you read about or hear about. Like your kind of experiences were so different and interesting. And one of the things I really like about your book is, which we'll get into because we got a little ways to get to till we get to that, is your whole analysis and of the situation, and what you tie it into is what makes it very unique. But not to derail it over to that now, but so sorry, continue. I didn't mean to derail it, but there's a lot I want to talk about with you, man. I'm just excited.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I'll say this, that I feel like I had a different experience because I was kind of coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
I was coming at it from an analytic standpoint. I wanted to know what was going on ultimately, and so I had that in my mind from the beginning, that I was going to figure this out, and figure out what's going on. And I think that a lot of people who start to have these experiences, they'll have like fear emotions that will take over, and they'll kind of run from the experience and try to deny it. And I think that I didn't do any of that. I insisted that I needed to know, regardless of how painful the experience might have been.
Sure. I was gonna say, it seemed like you suffered through a lot to kind of get to, to figure out what was happening.
Yeah. It was incredibly painful. And that's one of the aspects of this that I think that keeps people from ultimately realizing the truth of it, is that they will experience these painful experiences, and the first instinct is to run from it. I got to get out of here. I got to stop this.
Fight or flight, right?
Yeah. And I did not do that. So that's why I think I arrived at these different conclusions. And these conclusions that I arrived at, I can see, written on the pages of history, in all the world's religions.
Sure.
And so that's the conclusion that I came to.
Yeah.
But going back, I don't know if you want me to start with how.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. Before we get to the conclusions, let's let everyone know what happened. So you saw the videos, and then you started reading up on it, and then in your own analytical mind, you're like, hey, maybe there is something behind this, and then things really started kind of opening up to you.
Yeah. So I was sitting in my truck one night, and I had been reading all these books, and I had kind of reached the end of my analytical rope, in terms of things that I was willing to read, because I needed it to be a credible source in order for it to be a source for me.
Sure.
So, I started thinking there was a kind of a cliffhanger in one of Tom DeLonge's books that he leaves off, where these characters find these glowing tablets, and I thought, well, I wonder what those tablets were, so I started looking up various types of tablets, ancient tablets on my phone, sitting there in my truck. And I came across the Emerald Tablets, which is kind of a Hermetic philosophy type teaching. And it talks about Hermetism and Hermetic teaching. So I kind of looked into that a little bit. I was just following this stream of consciousness that, that we get roped into so often when we're just surfing the net.
Sure. Yeah.
And I came across this book called The Kabbalion, which is all about Hermetic teaching. And so I read the synopsis of it, and I thought, well, that just sounds kind of too out there for me, because one of the things about this book is that it talks about how nothing that happens is coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidence. And so it seems to imply that we have no free will, which is a very difficult thing for people to accept. So it becomes a difficult kind of concept to grasp, and that's the biggest problem people have with this book. And I thought, well, it's not for me then. I'm not going to read that, So I thought maybe there's like a MUFON chapter near me, and I can look that up. But I wasn't finding anything that was recent. I was only finding posts that were 10 years old from MUFON in the area. I was living in Maryland at the time, just outside D.C. And so I said, I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to have to leave it at that, and I'll have to wait for more releases from the government and from To the Stars Academy. And that's it, and I went to bed that night. So the next morning, I woke up and I had to drive south to the Patuxent River, which is, an hour and some change south from D.C. So I drove down there, and on my way back, I was headed back up to D.C. to go back to work. And this hatchback cuts me off just out of nowhere. And on the back of it, it said, MUFON, find us on Facebook. And I thought, oh, well, I don't do Facebook. That's why I didn't see this when I looked last night. And just then we were passing this a Hobby Lobby, which is like a hobby arts and crafts store.
Sure.
And I had never actually seen a physical store of Hobby Lobby before, but I knew it was all over the news with, this Supreme Court decision that was made concerning Hobby Lobby. So, I kind of made a note of it because it stood out in my mind. And I went home, or I went back to work, and then I went home. So late at night, I'm getting ready for bed. I had rented a room in somebody's house because this was just after I had arrived in Washington, D.C. So I was renting a room in someone's house, and I had to walk in front of the TV, and my roommate was sitting on the couch, and he said he was watching CNN, the talking heads, and he's a liberal, just kind of like I am. So he says, "Do you know what this is all about with these Republicans?" And I said, "No, what?" I'm paused on the stairs, talking to him. And he says, "Hobby Lobby." And I was like, "Hobby Lobby?" And he starts talking about how the Supreme Court decision allowed, dirty money into campaigns, blah, blah, blah. So I talked with him for a few minutes about that. And then I went up to my room and I shut the door, and I thought to myself, this kind of seems like a day of coincidences,
Yeah.
Last night I had been looking at that MUFON stuff, and a car cut me off just as I see this Hobby Lobby. And then my roommate just mentioned that. And so I started to feel very uncomfortable, my heart actually started pounding. It's kind of like the pounding you get when you have like a rush of adrenaline, but I didn't feel any adrenaline. So I thought maybe this is my medical condition coming back, and maybe I'm going to die or something. So maybe I should sit down. So I sat down for a bit, and I thought maybe this will subside if I just kind of calm down. And it didn't. In fact, I started to feel this intense urge to get in my car and drive. And I thought, I've never felt the urge to drive before, to get in my car and drive.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's not a common
So I thought it was a little yeah, I thought this is strange, you know. So I thought, I'm just going to do this. I'll get in my car and go drive, and I'll see that there's nothing to this, you know. So I get in my car and I pull out to the 3-point turn. I back into the first point of the 3-point turn, and I started thinking. I stopped and I thought, I can't do this. Because it's like near midnight, and if I keep going on these wild goose chases, I'm going to find myself in a straitjacket before long, you know. So I thought to myself, I'm just going to pull back. I'm going to pull back in and just forget this whole crazy thing. And I thought, you've been reading these books about this paranormal stuff, and it's getting to you. That's what I was thinking. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to pull in and forget about it. And just then I felt one of the most uncomfortable sensations I've ever felt in my entire life. I felt as though I had been attached to a light switch, right? And I felt this electric shock just shoot through my body. And I could feel, that buzzing sensation you get when you touch a live electrical wire. I felt that through my entire body. And I noticed it more acutely in my toenail beds. It kind of hurt a little bit. So as I'm feeling this buzzing, my hands are turning the steering wheel towards the road and my foot is stepping on the accelerator. And I did not do that.
Yes. So you're not feeling like you're even controlling the vehicle at that point.
Right. Yeah. And so, so
or your body for actually, you're not controlling your own like foot and hand and stuff.
Right. Exactly. And, so, the buzzing stopped just as suddenly as it came on, like someone had just flipped the switch off, and my car is drifting towards the road, and I slammed on the brakes, and I thought, okay, now I know that none of this is in my head. So, because I've been able to induce a lot of feelings in myself, but never the feeling of being electrocuted. Yeah. So I knew at this point whatever was happening was not in my head.
And did you feel like you were being directed to kind of go back to the road, or did you just feel like, or did you not know like what was going on? Like, now you're feeling physical manifestations of things, not just, psychological things, but did you feel like something was directing you?
Yes. Yeah, I did very much so. I started to feel a sense of urgency now to drive, which wasn't there before. It started to become quite urgent, so I thought to myself, well, I don't want to get electrocuted again. Yeah. So I'm just going to go, and I had remembered reading in Jacques Vallée's books about people having this sensation before abduction experience. So I thought, I don't know where I'm going, but I guess I'll drive back down to Pax River because that's where I was earlier. So I start driving towards the freeway, and I stopped at this gas station to pick up a drink because I thought, I don't know how long this is going to take. This could be all night, who knows? So when I stopped at this gas station, I started to feel all this emotion come back. And I got the sense that whatever had made me leave the house, whatever that purpose was going to happen right here at this gas station. And so I thought to myself, what's going to happen here? Am I going to get shot here? Is somebody going to die? Am I supposed to die here? What is going on? And I was a mess emotionally at this point. It's still a little bit difficult to talk about now. Sure. But so I'm scanning the gas station to, kind of figure out, well, what's going to happen. And then I see it right in front of me. I had parked right in front of it. Across the parking lot. I was parked at the pump, and there was a table outside, and there were these two women eating with eating at this table with some guy, right? And this guy was clearly homeless. And these women were dressed to the nines in like professional business attire. And so this is
like
just
what time of night is this?
So this is like in a bad part of town near almost midnight.
Yeah.
You know, near the freeway.
Yeah.
So this shouldn't have been happening.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, these two women looked like they were about to go brief Congress. They look like the women that I work with, the civilian females, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I think, okay, well,
like that would have been a weird sight at 3 p.m. Never mind at midnight.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was, the place was just filthy. There was, napkins blowing across and garbage blowing across the parking lot, you know? And here, these two women dressed like this are sitting with a homeless man eating. And it's just bizarre, you know? So, this feeling washes over me that I'm supposed to hear what they're talking about. And I thought, well, this is weird. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm terrified. And I hear this voice in my head, very forcefully and kind of angrily says, "Get out." So, so I got out of the truck and, you know, I'm making my way across the parking lot. And, you know, my legs are like wet noodles at this point, and I'm like fighting back tears. I'm trying not to look like the mess that I am at this point. So I get closer and I can see, you know, more detail. This guy, he's absolutely filthy. And he's got grass in his hair. And one of the women lifts up her hand and I could see that she's got a diamond tennis bracelet on. And she points at the homeless man and she says, "You see," she said, "there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason." She said, "I never sit at places like this, but something told me to sit here tonight." And with that, I kind of entered the store and I was like, no way. You know, no way did that just happen. So, I mean, that was it. That was, and then I started thinking about all the coincidences and how they had led me, and how this book, The Kabbalion, stated exactly that there's no such thing as coincidence. And, I thought, well, I'm supposed to read this book. So, I started reading it the next morning. You know, at first I was kind of hesitant to read this book, but, you know, seeing as how everything I had been through up to that point and this very paranormal way that this book came to me, I thought, well, there's got to be some reason I've got to read this. So I read it, and, you know, to my surprise, there was a lot in that book that made a lot of sense to me. And it talks about like 7 universal principles, the principle of mentalism. And one of the things that it talks about is how, you can think of the universe as a mental creation, and that, there's only a singular consciousness, and we are all extensions of that singular consciousness. And, you know, in reading that, I thought to myself, how could you know that? You know, how could you know that or even prove that ever?
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of a bold statement to make, to say that this is the true nature of the universe. So I found that there was some truth in it, but, you know, in knowing how this book came to me, I thought, I can't deny that, you know, that the universe is that, 'cause why else would this book have come to me in this way? You know,
Sure, yeah.
Because it was almost impossible to think about how the series of events that would have had to have happened to bring this book into my hand. And it must have been very purposeful.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
like,
you know, being an atheist,
it came up.
Go ahead.
The book came up, and then you dismissed it, and then you were like almost forced to really be like, something was forcing you to be like, no, you need to read this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like the universe was saying, no, really, you're going to read this book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So after that, I thought, well, okay, if this is some kind of learning experience, then I'm open to learning, and I thought, okay, so I'm ready for more experiences from which I can learn. And, of course, nothing could have been farther from the truth, because I was in no way prepared for the events that happened next.
Yeah.
So
you got the book.
Go ahead.
So you started reading the Kabbalion,
mm-hmm.
and then I think where we left off, you were saying like, well, how would you even, the broad claims of like kind of universal consciousness and stuff. And then I think then we kind of got sidetracked. So what happened after that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I told myself, okay, I'm ready for more experiences from which I can learn. I had read the Kabbalion several times, and I thought, okay, I've got that down, And so, I was laying in bed one night, and after I had said that I was ready for more,
yeah.
And I wake up because I feel somebody grab my arm, my right arm, and I opened my eyes. I was in my room. I'm looking at the window off to the left, and all of a sudden, the trim around the window in my room is starting to go slightly blurry. So I went to go raise my hands to my face to kind of wipe the sleep out of my eyes, and I noticed that I couldn't move. I was paralyzed.
Yeah. And
then I remembered, oh yeah, I woke up because somebody grabbed my arm, and I can still feel that hand on my arm. So I kind of, fought to turn my head to the right to see who was standing there. And I thought, and I even thought at a time, I should be terrified because it's the middle of the night and somebody's in my room and they're touching me. But I'm not scared for some reason. So I turn my head to the right and I see this, shadow figure standing over me. And it's looking into my face. All I can see is like the black shadowy outline of like a torso, 2 arms, and a head. And all of a sudden, as I'm watching this, my room starts to light up in this golden light that seems to be coming from the back of this entity standing over me. And the light becomes blinding, and then it concentrates into these rays of golden light coming out of its head. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this screen appears over the face of this entity in front of me. And it's almost like there was a tablet in front of its face, and it starts shifting through photographs of people that I know. And then it stops on a photograph of an ex of mine from 20 years ago. And then I start to lose consciousness as I feel this being crawl into my bed. So I then start to have this sexual dream with me and my ex from 20 years ago. It was a strange dream because there was no environment. It was me and my ex, and we were surrounded by nothing, absolutely nothing but black,
Yeah.
And so I started to think, this feels really real, like it's really happening. And then I start to open my eyes, and I'm back in my room, and I can see that there is a female. She is sitting on top of me, and she has blue skin. And my hands are on her thighs, and I can feel her skin it doesn't feel like normal skin. It's much thicker and tighter and smoother than human skin would normally be. And so I start to try and look up towards her face, and it's just blurred out. I'm not able to see her face, but I can see her body there. And so I'm in and out of this state several times, back into my dream state and then back into my room where I can see her. I mean, I could even see the top that she was wearing. It looked like a kind of a tube top that was made out of like this metallic. I don't even know. I mean, I describe it as like maybe being made out of some kind of precious metal because of the way it glistened in the light. But I honestly don't know what it was made out of. But it wasn't like anything I had ever seen. And I thought to myself, as this was happening, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. And I even had the thought that there must be some kind of craft parked in the backyard right now, you know, that she had arrived in. So, you know, I then, you know, I'm in and out of this dream state. I wake up the next morning and, I'm just thinking to myself, as soon as I opened my eyes, I was like, what was that? You know, what just happened? So I go down to my truck and I light a cigarette and I start like dry heaving because I start to think, you know, what does this mean? You know, now, that, you know, at no point did I think that I was crazy or losing my mind. Because of course I had been present for this whole Gimbal event. I knew that this stuff was real now. So I knew that this was something that was actually happening. You know, and one of the weird things, I'm not even sure if I put this in the book, but a few nights before that, I woke up to the sound of like some breaking glass downstairs and my roommate's dog just barking her head off and then running out the back door. And I was like, what, you know, what's going on? And then my roommate texts me from his room downstairs and he says that he woke up and he saw someone standing on the back porch where his bedroom is.
Yeah.
And that he woke up because Velcro, his dog started barking at her, at this person on the back porch. And that he went to go turn his lamp on and he hit it and it fell over on the floor and broke and shattered. And that was all the noise that I had heard. And then he let her out the back door to go chase whatever this was. And, you know, he was saying to me, you know, that this was a person on the back porch. And I said, no, I think it was one of those deers that's always hopping the fence. You know, that's probably what you saw. But, you know, in light of what happened to me, I don't think that's what happened.
Yeah.
You know? So, so there was that. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew that this was really happening now. And I didn't know what it meant, you know, because I felt like I wanted to understand this and I was just basically raped, you know, and what is that? You know, that's just, that's nonsense. It's garbage, you know?
Yeah.
So I felt kind of violated, obviously, but, and I thought, you know, all this stuff, people talking about alien hybrids, is that real? You know? And then I started to think about, you know, what are the implications for that? Are we like a freaking slave race or something like that? What is going on here? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, that was the end of that experience. And I kind of kept it to myself, until things started to just kind of just really spiral out of control. So after that,
like, what's the time frame of all this stuff? Like, you know what I mean? Is this like over weeks or months or like a year?
So these two incidences happened within weeks of each other.
Yeah.
It was pretty successive. And then everything after that was successive. You know, this whole thing with the Kabbalion, started when that article was released in the New York Times, and that was December of 2017. So this stuff went on through like August of 2018.
Yeah.
And then that was the length of everything that happened in the book. So, you know, I started to then have constant nightmares, all the time. Every time I went to sleep, I would have some just awful, horrible nightmare. And it was always just like people being chopped up with chainsaws or, my parents being murdered with an axe right in front of me. Just crazy, crazy dreams. And I would wake up, just covered in sweat. I can remember several times where I woke up and it was as though I had been standing in the shower. I could have wrung my shirt out in the sink. Yeah. It was, so that was happening a lot. And so I kind of had this breaking point where and I had this nighttime paranoia, constant nighttime paranoia. I began sleeping with my lights on, because I could not bring myself to be in a dark room, because who knew what was going to happen in that dark room?
Yeah, sure.
Because I had this experience with this blue female, and there's no way I'm turning the lights off again. So I was not sleeping. There were nights that I would stay up all night long and just sit on the edge of my bed because I could not stand the thought of having another nightmare. I couldn't do it. And I started to do this just heavy, awful depression just set in, and I would start to come home from work, and all I could do was just come home and lay on the floor in my bedroom, like shivering and crying, and like my teeth are chattering, and it was just uncontrollable, So, I reached this breaking point where I had to talk to somebody about it. So I called my brother. And I started to talk to him about it, and I was a little shocked by his reaction, because I told him about the blue female, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, that is awesome." Your
as a brother will do.
DNA, yeah, he's like, your DNA is in space right now, and and of course that was no comfort to me at this time.
Yeah, sure.
So so anyway, I was experiencing all kinds of paranormal things. There was I would wake up sometimes to the sound of a woman just screaming as though she's being murdered in the house, and there's no female in the house, but I would wake up to this. So, all of this stuff was just very unsettling. Banging on the walls in the middle of the night, footsteps. There was at one point I went out to my truck in the middle of the day, and I thought, I'm just going to call a friend of mine, and I'm going to talk. We're going to talk about anything but this. I just want to talk about it. I want something to take my mind off of this. And so I'm standing there, and the phone is ringing, and he's not answering. And I feel someone push on my cell phone with such force from behind me that I almost dropped it. And so I, got a tighter grip on it, and I turned around expecting to see my roommate there, and there was no one there. Nobody.
Yeah.
There wasn't even anybody walking down the road. So, I ran inside the house in a panic. And then I came back down to my truck later that night to call my brother. And as I was sitting in my truck, I felt that again, where someone pushed on my cell phone with such force that I almost dropped it. But of course, there was no room behind me for anyone to be in the cab with me, behind me. So I didn't even bother to turn around. I knew what it was, So yeah, it just got nuts. So my brother, in talking to him, he says, this can't be the truth of this. There's got to be something you're missing. This exotic technology does not exist so they can come down here and scare the bejesus out of you. There's got to be more to it than this. And so he kind of brought me back to reality, and I thought, you know what, you're right. And I started thinking about that light show that I had seen in my room with the rays of light coming out of her head. And I thought to myself, that looks like religious art from all over the world.
Yeah.
You have some deity or something that's pictured, and there's the halo or these rays of gold extending from the head. And so I thought to myself, there's a lot more going on here than I currently understand, and I need to understand it. So I looked into who wrote the Kabbalion. And it turns out the guy, one of the authors, it's called the Kabbalion by Three Initiates.
Three Initiates, yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the authors was a guy named William Walker Atkinson, and he wrote like 105 books. And so I was like, okay, let's dig into these books then and see what this is all about.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started reading these books, and he published books by other authors, like a woman named Mabel Collins, and they all talked about this initiatory experience. And I thought to myself, is that what's happening here? Am I in this process? I don't even know, and in a lot of these books, they're talking about, there comes upon the soul a great storm. And then after that storm, there's the calm that follows the storm. And I didn't really understand where all of that was going, and so one day I get the urge to look into mechanization just out of nowhere. So I'm looking at videos on YouTube of like robots that are doing all kinds of crazy things, backflips, catching boxes, putting boxes on shelves, Yeah. And I thought to myself, this is pretty amazing stuff. We could mechanize everything and nobody would ever have to work again, And I started to think that maybe that's the path that they were leading me down, that maybe I'm supposed to realize that that's what we're supposed to do. And so I'm looking into this mechanization, for like a month. And I had gone down to Virginia to check on a few rental properties that I own down there. And as I arrived, I was taking my stuff out of the truck and bringing it into my house down there. And I see this craft like on the horizon, and it's just floating across the horizon. And it's like this egg-shaped kind of thing. And it's got like this brownish, copperish tinge to it. And I reached to my pocket. I didn't have my cell phone. I had left it inside. And I knew that by the time I went inside and got it, this thing would be gone,
Sure, yeah.
So I thought to myself, they followed me down here from D.C. and they wanted me to know that they had followed me down here. And I thought that's pretty weird, So I wake up the next morning and I go to turn on my cell phone and it's not working. Then I turned on my e-reader. It's not working. I went to go to my laptop. It's not working. And then I realized all these things are linked and I've caught a virus. And all of my devices are now destroyed because of this virus. And I became livid. I was very angry. Not because my devices had been destroyed, but because somebody had created a virus specifically just to destroy electronics.
Yeah. Yeah, like what's the
and
purpose?
Then I started and then I started to think to myself, well, we can't mechanize everything because all of this stuff has to be linked through AI, and viruses can travel through that stuff, and anybody who wants to create a virus could shut everything down.
Yeah.
And so I was.
Well, worse, they could corrupt the AI to do wacky things, or whatever. Yeah, there's not just a virus to shut shit down. There's a whole plethora of things that could be done that would be malicious and with bad intent.
Yeah, and so I just got very angry, and I thought to myself, I don't know what I've been roped into here, but we can't do that. The human race can't do this. Whatever you're trying to tell me we have to do. So I was emotional because of everything that had been happening. I hadn't been sleeping. The night terrors, everything, it was all just becoming too much. And so I had this temper tantrum, and I grabbed my electronics and I just smashed them on the steps of my house there in Portsmouth, Virginia. And some friends of mine were there, and they watched us and with horror.
Yeah.
And I threw my stuff in the truck, and I drove back to D.C. and I said, write to me if you want to contact me. And I drove back to D.C. and I was just so angry, and I remember just like pounding on the steering wheel, and I was like, leave me alone. I don't know what all this is about, but I'm tired, I'm just tired. So, I thought, I forget this, forget all of it, forget these books. I'm going to go home and I'm going to throw all of this stuff in the garbage, and I'm going to forget about it because this is worthless. Whatever they want us to do, we can't do it as humans. We're just not there yet, So I went to bed that night. I got back to DC late. And I went to bed, and I hadn't thrown the books away. I was like, I'll do it in the morning, first thing in the morning. So anyway, I go to sleep, and then I start to wake up, and I can feel that familiar heavy feeling that I always feel when they're around, where you're paralyzed. And I was just immediately pissed. I was angry. And so my room starts to come into focus, and I'm looking to see what's going to happen and what's in front of me. And there's this small man standing there. He looked kind of like a yard gnome, is the only way I can really describe him.
Like that size?
He was a little bit taller. So I was looking across my nightstand, and I could see his head poking up above my nightstand, and I could see that he had like a locked white beard and locked white hair. And he looked very clean, and he was wearing these thick, dark glasses that were just black, and I could see that there was some kind of a red glow within the center of these glasses, where I could kind of see through it, and I saw like a little bit of the side of his nose through the lens. But obviously that was some kind of technology. What it does, I had no idea. But anyway, so I'm looking at him, and then he says to me, "Don't give up, keep going." And then he puts me back to sleep. And as I'm falling back asleep, I have a few choice words for him. So, I woke up the next morning, and I was like, he's got to know something I don't know. Maybe he knows something that I'll never know. I don't know. I said, but I obviously have to keep going with this, whatever it is. And so I did. I kept the books. I kept myself isolated, as I had been doing. Cause I kind of, when these things started, I was like, okay, I'm turning off my TV. I'm not going to have any distractions. I'm going to figure this out, So I spent a lot of time just in my room, just me and my journal.
Yeah, and all those books that you were reading. And okay. Sorry, we had a glitch, and the call got dropped. But you were talking about, like the last thing I heard you were saying, you'd been kind of thinking about all this stuff and not watching TV, and kind of just there with your books and kind of trying to figure everything out.
Yeah. And so, I was reading these books, trying to figure everything out. Towards the end of the experiences, I started to feel a little bit better. This deep depression that I had started to lift a little bit. And this was, heading into spring. and I had been reading this book called A Series of Lessons in Raha Yoga, and it has these mantras, that you repeat, and you meditate on. And so, I started to feel better. And I was starting to think to myself one day as I was driving home, what's all this about,
Yeah.
And then I heard this voice, kind of like the voice that told me to get in my truck, and it said, you're to act as a shepherd of men. And, when I heard that, I was just like, no. I was like, that's a little too Christianity for my liking.
Yeah.
And I'm not a religious person, and I did not like the religious undertone of that. And I said, so what do you mean? And the voice said, well, there's not much time. And I said, what do you mean there's not much time? And then at that moment, I was instantly just kind of, and this is while I'm driving down the freeway in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
I found myself suddenly, it was nighttime, or evening, and I'm driving through an intersection, and there's all these like police lights everywhere. And it's almost like someone's chasing me or something. I don't know, but I'm going through this intersection, and then I see this car coming at me, and it's about to T-bone me. And then it's like in slow motion, right? All of a sudden I can feel like the breaking glass hitting my face. And I can see the front end of this car just like ripping through the cab coming at me. And I'm like watching this happen in slow motion, and all of a sudden it happens and it's over. And then I'm back in my truck driving down the freeway,
Yeah.
right where we left off. And I thought to myself, I should have had some kind of maybe reaction to that, some kind of terror about, I've just seen my death, and I didn't. I had no reaction to that whatsoever. I didn't really care. As I'm exiting the freeway, all of a sudden I get hit with this wall of just emotion, and it wasn't mine. And it was the oddest thing I've ever felt, and all of a sudden I noticed, I can feel the trees. I can feel the grass around me. I can feel the other drivers on the road. I have this sense of them, and I can experience them and their emotions, and I can feel that, and it was kind of disorienting. And as I drove home, it gradually subsided. And I thought to myself, well, that's it. That kind of proves this to me, that there's this singular consciousness, and you can experience the world around you as though it is a part of you. And that's what I had just experienced,
Yeah.
And so I continued to isolate myself. I continued to just be emotional constantly. And then I reached this phase of that, which was much more stable. And then I began to experience that all the time. I could feel emotions of people around me. All the tension had left my body. And it was like, I knew immediately what it was. In the East, they describe it as like nirvana, or being one with God. And that's just what it was. I mean, I could experience the world around me as though it was me. I kind of had an idea of what people were going to say approaching me before they even said it. And that was, to me, the ultimate proof to be able to experience that for yourself, And so, I I put down this book, Raha Yoga, that I had been reading to just experience the world around me in this way, you know, and it was just the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I could sense like these universal forces at work that I didn't know even existed. I could feel them, you know, and it was like, I felt like I was standing in a bubble, and I could feel like all of this emotion and just badness just flying through the air all around me and just whipping everywhere and acting on people and things around me. But I was just in this bubble, and I could kind of almost see it and sense it, but it wasn't interacting with me anymore, you know? And so that was just crazy. I found that, you know, I could do these just crazy things at this time. Like in one instance, my roommate's dog, she had gotten into a fight with a groundhog, and it had taken a chunk of her ear. And my roommate, in a panic, you know, he's trying to get the bleeding to stop, and it's not stopping. And so he grabs some silver nitrate, and he tells me, "Hold her down. You know, this is going to burn like hell." And so, you know, I started to think back on, you know, some of the things that have been reported about these beings doing, you know, how they can just put someone to sleep. And I had experienced that myself. And so I thought, why can't I put her to sleep? And then she won't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I know that this sounds crazy, but so I started to imagine that heaviness that I would feel when they were around, that paralysis. And I started to imagine that like going through my hands into her head, because I was holding her head. And my hands just got really hot. They were red, and she was starting to snore. And she was totally asleep. And so he's putting the silver nitrate on there. He's like, "This is going to burn like hell. Hold her down." And, you know, and she didn't have any reaction to it. He was like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah.
She didn't react to that at all, you know? And then I kind of woke her back up, and she just went on about her day. She was fine. And so, you know, things like that happened. At one point, I don't know how I did these things. I can't explain them scientifically, but I know that they are factual and that they can be done. But, you know, someone had come to me one day at work and told me something that he shouldn't have known about someone. And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" You know? And, you know, he got kind of smug, and he says, "Well, you know, a little birdie told me."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, "Who told you?" You know? And then I looked at him with the intent of getting the answer. And then all of a sudden, like in my own mind, instantly, I had that conversation, a memory of it, and who he had it with. And, and so I knew that, you know, I knew it. And I knew that, in fact, he had just come from that conversation, because he was wearing the same thing, you know.
So you had his memory of that conversation? Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, you know, that was weird. But, you know, I came to realize that these things are just, all of this is just a natural aspect of the universe. You know, we don't need to be afraid of that. And that you can kind of know that for yourself. I mean, there were other experiences I had with like dead people in dreams. One experience was, and this was later on, much later on when I started writing the book. I had a dream where this guy was sitting across from me. He was an elderly gentleman, kind of stocky. He had this deep voice, and he was like surrounded by this slightly white glow. And he was teaching me about human psychology. And he was telling me, that people can know something subconsciously without knowing it consciously, and that when they have this type of experience, they will call it like intuition, right? And they and it just causes this impression on their waking life. But that once you go through this experience, that intuition becomes a knowing rather than just an impression on your waking life, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And so as I woke from this dream, I heard the name Robert Moore being repeated over and over again in my head. So I wrote down his name. And I decided to look and see if he had written any books. And sure enough, he did. And I was reading this book that he wrote called The Archetype of Initiation. And it was then that kind of the totality of my experiences, I kind of put everything together. That's why I in reading this book, I was like, that's why the Kabbalion was written by the three initiates. This is an initiation. And everything in this book spoke to that. And I put this book down one day, and on the back cover was a picture of Robert Moore. And I looked at that picture and I was like, that is the guy from my dream. Yeah. So I looked him up, and he passed away about a year before my experiences began. And so I had some contact with him in this dream. And all of his books, of course, touch on the psychology of this whole process and how that works. And so I included that in a chapter of psychology in my book.
Yeah. Yeah. And did, can you still do you still have those experiences where you feel like you could do things like that, with the dog and stuff, or did that pass,
well, so
are you still having these types of experiences, or did it kind of run its course and pass?
So I'll explain that a little bit. So at the time I had put down this book, Raha Yoga, right?
Yep.
And so this connection I had to everything was so powerful, that I felt like I could almost see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one day that shut off. I knew it instantly when it shut off. I felt it immediately in my shoulders. All of a sudden, my shoulders slumped, and I was a little bit more heavy.
Yeah.
I felt it in my back. My posture had changed instantly. I knew it. And so I was kind of devastated by that. I was like, what? Why did that shut off?
Yeah.
And so I went back to this book, Raha Yoga, and it talks about how. So he had written this book as a class, right? He would send the chapters out to his students, and this is early 1900. He would send them through the mail, and the students were writing letters back to him about what they were experiencing and doing these mantras and meditations. And in the last three chapters where I had stopped, he goes off on a tangent that is outside the normal course of the book. And he says, we've been getting a lot of letters from students talking about the pain they're experiencing. And he said, and he goes off on this tangent about how this pain you're experiencing, when it becomes the most acute, then be cheered that you've reached the crisis of your new spiritual birth, and that this is just you moving from one plane of existence to a higher plane of existence on which you will play a much more heavy role, Yeah. And I thought, no way, because that is exactly what had happened to me,
Yeah.
And Mabel Collins talks about the calm that follows the storm. And then she also says, that this calm will only last a certain time. It'll only last a little while, and then it'll stop. And so, for the most part, those abilities have shut off. But in realizing what consciousness is now, when things happen to me, I can kind of follow those in a stream of consciousness, and it will lead me to where I need to go. Yeah. And I'll kind of give you an example of that. So I had what hasn't shut off though is this voice in my head that I hear sometimes, and it'll give me the names of authors to read, and I'll find myself sometimes wanting to look into something. I feel the urge to look at something, right? So I'll pull it up, and eventually, if I follow that, it will lead me to something that I had been wondering about. And then I'm like, oh, this is the answer, And so that is how I did a lot of the research for my book.
Yeah.
And just being led by consciousness to certain things. And one of the things that I was led to was this idea of the Greek mysteries. And what all of that was. And the Greek mysteries were the experience that was kind of central to the ancient Greek religion, right? It was the central experience, religious experience. And they called them the mysteries. And initiates into these mysteries would go through just that. It was an initiation process. And at the end of that, initiates were said to be unafraid of death at the end, right?
Yeah.
So they had some awareness now that there's no such thing as death, and they were okay with that. And I started reading accounts of the mysteries, and one of the things, Plutarch, who was a priest at the Temple of Delphi, left an account of the mysteries and what they were. And one of the things he says is that, these initiates are led through these winding, never-ending passages, and they take this journey to an invisible end. And then gradually light is restored, and then at the side of pure and holy men, they experience the festival of rebirth. And so then I started thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of what I had been through. And he talks about how the initiates, they confront fear, and they experience shuddering and crying and wailing and everything else. And so I thought, this is exactly what I went through.
Yeah.
And then I started looking into that. And then, I had known about Joseph Campbell and his whole idea of, the hero's journey, and about how the hero goes through this cycle of a kind of like a death and then a resurrection. And then I started noticing, well, all religions kind of have this death and resurrection mythology. And I started to apply that to my own experience in that, within this, you just kind of have to die to certain aspects of yourself, right? So I was very afraid, at one point.
Yeah.
And I kind of just got rid of that because you can only take so much, before you reach a point where you just shut it off and you say, this has been going on for so long. I could live the rest of my life in terror, or I could just not be afraid anymore. And so that's what you do. You just kind of get rid of those things in the psyche. And you decide that you're not going to be afraid anymore. And that's really when things changed for me, when I decided to shut off that fear, because I had just had enough, And ultimately, these kinds of transformative experiences that we have as humans, when we change our mind about something, or we decide to do something new and take a different approach, ultimately those things arise from a place of exhaustion. You know, we get tired of being afraid, or we get tired of being angry or being mad all the time, and we just say enough's enough, and we shut it off. And it was in all of that I realized that psychologically speaking, really you're only a victim of something to the extent that you want to be. And I know that might sound a little cold and callous, but it's the truth. I mean, you don't have to be a victim if you don't want to. You know, you don't have to view yourself as a victim. And it doesn't matter if other people around you view you that way. What matters is how you feel about it personally.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So, and just this is, I don't know, a question I have now, having gone through this and gone through these experiences and coming out on the other side and knowing the things that you know now. These things that have talked to you, like, whether you've seen the gimbal footage or like, waking up, from sleep paralysis and seeing some kind of like shadow person that's emanating light, or the blue skinned female, things like that. What do you think these things are? Like, is this, because, so many people have different ideas about things. They're like, oh, it's UFO. I mean, it's extraterrestrials from other planets, or it's some kind of interdimensional being, or it's if someone's going through the terror part of it, they might think it's something more demonic. Your sense of what this is, or is this just something like, when you get into universal consciousness, is this you telling your stuff and pushing yourself along the path that you need to be on? Like, just be curious to see what you think, like from your experience, what do you think these things are that are kind of pushing you and leading you on the way?
I've been asked that a few times, and, from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know this kind of universal consciousness and doesn't know that to be the truth for themselves, they might look at this and say, these are aliens or extraterrestrials, and that might be how they would describe them.
Yeah.
But obviously, in light of my experiences, they've been called all kinds of things. Demons, angels, the gods.
Yeah. Non-human intelligence, whatever. Yeah.
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 And so, and now you have people talking about interdimensionality and things like that. But, in terms of me and my perspective on it now, after having gone through this, I don't view them as being any different than myself or than you. I think it's kind of hard to explain, but if you know that the universe is a singular consciousness, then everything you see and everything you experience is an aspect of yourself, right?
Sure.
And so that's kind of how I view them. I don't view them as being separate from myself any more than I view you as being separate from me. And that's just the way I kind of think about it now.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. A lot of people, with this kind of thing, there's a tendency to want to put things in boxes.
Yeah.
To say that this is what this is, and then, but in doing that, you automatically limit it to that box.
Yeah, you put it in you almost put blinders on to just to only limit it to view that box and what's in it.
Yeah, and so with them and with these craft and stuff like that, I would encourage people to not do that. Don't put it in this nice, neat little box. It is all of the above. It's been here a long time. This presence, it's always been here, in fact. And I kind of would speculate that possibly we aren't even the first. Humans, anyway, aren't even the first race to come off this planet, and that maybe this is just, a nursery, the Earth, and it's a nursery to raise consciousness. So you're making beings that are conscious and more aware, and you're kind of bringing them up to that, up to their level, where they are in terms of consciousness. And I think that's the trajectory and the path that we're on.
Yeah.
And I know that might be kind of difficult for people to accept, but I think that that's probably closer to the truth than anything else.
So do you think that's what that message was for you, that you're supposed to be like a shepherd of man and kind of communicate this stuff with people to help other people along that path, or to at least get them thinking towards that, or like being aware of that is even an option, or like as something that's out there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but I at the end of this experience, I wanted to know what, not only did I want to understand what was happening, but I wanted to know why, how, I wanted to understand everything about it. And so I was kind of just, through consciousness, I was led through that, into Jungian psychology, into how psychedelics play into this, and how they've always been used in this experience.
Yeah, and there's evidence of that even among, like, in the Greeks with I forgot what the exact psychedelic was, but they found trace elements of something that was made out of like a fungus or something in a wine, and they feel like that was part of some of like certain initiation rituals.
Yeah, and they there was a belief, because at the temple to Demeter, which was where the main mystery would happen, it was called the Eleusinian mystery. It was in Eleusis, Greece, and that was where they found content in vessels and stuff of this psychedelic drug.
Yeah.
And so they think that played a role in it, and I tend to agree with that, because if one of the things that I've looked at is I've kind of looked at the science of the psychedelics and the involvement in that. And that was something that I wondered about for quite a long time. And through consciousness, I was led to Timothy Leary's book called Flashbacks. It's his autobiography. And Timothy Leary, I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but he was a Harvard professor, and he started to do research on psychedelic drugs. He was a professor of psychology. And so he got heavy into that. But the problem with Timothy Leary is that he decided that he would also take the doses himself. And so that kind of threw his reputation into the garbage, because, that's not how you do research. You don't take the drugs yourself. But he was doing that. And so, in reading this book, I came across, he had given these psychedelics to someone who had been through an experience like mine, that had reached this point without using psychedelic drugs. And so what he said that this guy said, he's like, yeah, I already know this. This is old hat to me. When he started taking the drugs, he said, but this is a shortcut. This isn't, you lack perspective when you do it this way.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I started looking at is that there are, all kinds of ancient texts that talk about using these psychedelic drugs, but that you need to be careful, because there isn't that perspective there. You have to provide that perspective as an elder, right? You need to explain what these people are experiencing, and to kind of pull them back from the edge when they go too far. Mm. And so that was how ancient cultures always used this drug. They would start the initiation process by giving them these psychedelic drugs, and then as the initiation went on, the initiate would enter this phase of like drug-induced psychosis. And I went through that psychosis. It wasn't drug-induced, obviously, but that's how it happened. And you can see evidence of that today, evidence of how that works today, because there are different subs on Reddit. And if you go into the psychosis sub, you'll see people often posting about how they took LSD or they took mushrooms or psilocybin or something like that.
Yeah.
And that subsequently they had this drug-induced psychosis that lasted for months, right? Which is the exact experience that the ancients tried to get people to go through, and which was the process that I went through, although not drug-induced.
Yeah.
And it culminates and ends with you knowing for yourself the true nature of the universe. And I think that's pretty profound.
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, and there's also, and it's probably like you read when you were reading up on some of the, like a lot of people get there through, not a lot of people, but there's a subsets of people that try and get into those states through meditation as well. You know, they can get into that same type of state. Psychedelic does seem to be kind of sometimes the shortcut, but with the shortcut, like with anything, like I think what you're saying, you gotta kind of warn people about is that, you know, like you said, you don't get the context or you don't have the guidance through it to really understand, you know, the whole of what's going on, or to guide you to where you need to be. So that there is kind of a danger there. And right now we're in a time where, you know, psychedelics are getting more and more traction in the news or like in the world, and it's starting to get decriminalized or legalized, and there's more and more research going on, and more people are getting open to it and susceptible to it, which, you know, could be a good thing, but, you know, you just got to kind of make sure that you're I don't know, for lack of a better terms, and not to simplify it, but you're doing things right, you know, and because that could be bad. But I feel like, you know, I've dabbled in it somewhat, and, you know, I've seen things and gone on some trips with the psilocybin. I've only messed with mushrooms, but at the end you do come out of it kind of like better. I don't know how to explain it. Like better mindset, better in your head if you go into it the right way. You know, there's some people that, you know, they're going to use stuff and go out to a concert and it'll be weird, and you know, and it's not to sound like hippie or woo woo things, but you kind of got to treat this as like a sacred experience and give it the proper respect. Or like, I could see it being very bad if like you just go out and you walk around the city and some weird stuff happens, and like you're around people and you're not in the right mindset or the right environment or the right context, it could go bad, I think, you know, and or you're not going to get out of it what you need. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with psychedelics coming more to forefront. It seems like, you know, with the decriminalization and kind of almost like destigmatization of marijuana, like I think psychedelics are up next for that. But, you know, the good thing is that there's a lot of research on psychedelics and like just showing some of the beneficial aspects of it for people with things like PTSD and whatnot. This is kind of even just going away from kind of the whole spiritual or thing. But, you know, one of the things that a lot of people do talk about with psychedelics is it does bring you to more of a place of, you know, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like singularity, or where you're talking about with, you know, universal consciousness. And, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just a wide open thing. There's definitely a lot going on in the world now where it seems like, you know, that is something where more and more people are getting pushed to. So, it's kind of an interesting time.
You had a guest on a previous episode that was on talking about psychedelics. And one of the things he said was he was talking about how psychedelics seem to help with a multitude and a whole range of different psychological ailments. Yeah. You know? And that was one of the reasons why in looking at the psychology of all of this, I decided to go back to school for psychology, because I understand that all of these, you know, multitude of different psychological ailments that we classify, and we talk about how, bipolar disorder and this and that. They are all of those things are related to this transformation in one way or another. The question is how, and what does it mean? And so that's really my interest in going back to school. I want to figure out, if somebody is bipolar, what does that mean in terms of this? Where are they on the path to this transformation? Because ultimately that's where all of these different ailments come from. Yeah. Is not going through this and not knowing that.
Oh, does it seem like people just get like stuck somewhere and that's why they can't advance and that's why it looks like there's some kind of mental issue? Is that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely what happens. I think that happens in a lot of abduction experiences. Whitley Strieber, I think, is a perfect example of that, right? He started having these experiences. My experience started and ended within a year. Yeah. Right? That's all it took. But if you have things like fear and things like that come into the picture and take over, this process can drag on for 20, 30 years, right? Before you finally get so exhausted from it that you give up that fear or give up whatever it is you're hanging on to. And, in Whitley Strieber's last book that he just released, called A New World, he says exactly that, that in the end, he's found this consciousness, this universal consciousness, and he realizes now that that's kind of what this was all about. And some people call it awakening. There are all kinds of subs on Reddit dedicated to this. There's Awakened, Soul Nexus, people who have experienced this either through psychedelic drugs or on their own. And, a lot of people look at my experiences and they want to say, well, you were kind of led through it by these beings, what makes you so special? And I don't think, honestly, I don't view it that way. In a way, I kind of feel sorry for myself because, that's how I got here. I needed all of this extra help, in order to get to this point. In other words, other people will just take some psychedelic drugs, they'll go through this, and then they'll arrive at the conclusion and be awakened and not ever have some kind of being standing over them saying, okay, now do this, but I needed that extra help. I couldn't just do this on my own. I needed that guidance. And so I think if anything, that makes me even less special, that they had to shepherd me through this and kind of drag me along. Whereas other people don't need that,
Yeah. No. But also, I don't know, there's something to be said about learning things, quote unquote, the hard way, like I think you get more of a deeper understanding of things than some of the shortcuts. Not always, but but yeah, I mean, like your experience is more intense than a lot of other people's, and some people this never even comes into their frame of consciousness at all, or their frame of reference at all. But I think one thing that this is just going back into like the minutia of regular world that people need to understand about you is that you quit your military career just a couple years before retirement to write this book and to get this out there. Whereas so it's like, you don't, let's be honest, these types of books, this isn't going to make you rich or a millionaire, right? It's,
right.
If you had stayed in the military and just for the last couple of years, you could have had probably a really nice retirement with like monthly checks and like healthcare and stuff for the rest of your life and all these other things. Well, you might still have some of those benefits, but like you're probably not getting the same level of monthly check, retirement check and stuff. So it was like you gave up some of this stuff to be able to write your book and kind of get the word out that you wanted to, the word that you wanted to get out,
Yeah. And, I didn't actually even want to write this book, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I once again, I felt like this urge to write the book.
Yeah.
I was feeling compelled to do it, and it wasn't relenting. So I thought, well, okay, I'll write the book. But then it came time, I can't release this book and be an active military member. That the two things just don't mesh, you know?
Do you think that do you think you would have been discharged because of it, or is it would have just been hard the last few years, or?
So I just realized that in order to do that and in order to say what I needed to say, that it was just going to be a pain, to be honest with you, that I didn't need, I got to the point that, I was just about finished with it. They had to review the book, before I could release it.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to scrub it to make sure there was nothing classified in it. And so I was talking to some people about doing interviews, and they were like, well, since you're still active duty, you're going to have to get a list of questions that they're going to ask you. And then we want to see how are you going to respond to each of these questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not really an interview. That's like, that's just like a structured Q&A.
Sure.
That's just kind of garbage. There couldn't be any off the cuff questions. You got to follow the script.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that.
Pretty much like it was pretty much like campaign trail questions. Like it's going to be asked, and you can't go off script.
Yeah, exactly.
How, one thing I want to ask you about, like now you're back in school and going into a career in psychology and going for a degree in psychology. Do you, like having gone through these experiences, and I'm sure, most of the other students haven't, and I know it might be weird with COVID and you might not be like in classrooms, but do you feel like, do you like relate, like, are you learning more about your experiences going through like this kind of program? Are you bringing this stuff up? Like, how is this affecting like your school, or your education?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, in studying this psychology stuff, I definitely have a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
Like I have a different perspective on depression and things like that, and a lot of these psychological ailments. Like, a lot of people will tell you if you go to a psychologist and you tell them you're depressed, they're going to put you on antidepressants, and they'll tell you, your depression is because of a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that you take these pills and it's going to restore some kind of normal chemical balance in your brain. And I don't see it that way. Yeah. I think that a lot of these ailments and things arise from improper thinking.
Yeah.
So in other words, you don't become depressed because there's a chemical imbalance in the brain. I think either way, there is a chemical imbalance in the brain, but what causes that, I think, are your improper thoughts and your improper approach to life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, there's not as much mentoring for that type of stuff as there might have been in past times, like, it's like in the world today, it's just kind of rushed, and you go through things, and, and everyone wants to easy out. So, now our medical care is more just prescribing medicines for physical things without looking at the ramifications of that, or it never seems to be getting to the root of the problem. It just seems to be dealing with symptoms chemically or
right.
interventionally, rather than getting to the root of the issue.
Yeah. And I think the root of the issue is consciousness, actually. And I think that that's the root of the issue of everything. Because, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she was saying, what happened to you? You don't care about, voting rights anymore. You don't care about, equality or, anything like that anymore. What is wrong with you? And, my answer to that is that I don't view those things as the problem, right? I think there is a singular problem, which is the fact that we haven't found consciousness, and that all of these other things, this racism, inequality, poverty, all of those things are results of that. So these are really just symptoms of the larger problem, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely.
And so, the only way to finally and permanently rid yourself of these symptoms is to cure the problem, right? Once everybody knows who and what they are, all of these other things just melt away.
Yeah.
They're not issues anymore.
Yeah. So how is it going through school? I only ask because, I went through grad school and I found there's so much, you feel like these are going to be bastions of like education, and you just find that there can be, not everywhere and not every school, not every program, but there can be a lot of indoctrination and dogma that gets forced on you. Are you finding like resistance to this type of stuff when you're dealing with your professors and dealing with the work that you got to do in your program? Or is it like, are people like open and become, like, are people open to like, your perspectives on things? It's just a curiosity for me as someone who's went through school.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a crapshoot.
Sure.
There are people who are more open to it than others. In fact, so in one of my classes, there was one lecture where the professor was talking about, exactly what we were just talking about, psychedelic drugs and their use throughout history. And she was saying that she doesn't like calling them drugs.
Yeah.
Because there's this whole, culturally speaking, throughout the world, these drugs have been not drugs, but
medicine,
they're like a gateway to a spiritual experience, And so, she's reluctant to just put them in the box of these are drugs, and they have an effect on the brain, and kind of deny this whole culturally spiritual thing surrounding them that has been going on for thousands of years, So there are quite a few people that are very accepting of that kind of thing, and there are others that aren't, that want to stick to the so-called science,
Sure. Yeah, no, it's and that's going to be one of the hurdles just in life and in the world, is that, there's some people are open to things and not. What's your plan? Like, I mean, it sounds like you were given kind of a heavy, for lack of a better term, heavy cross to bear. And I'm not trying to say it in a religious term, but they're like, hey, you're a shepherd of man, and this and that, and that was kind of like, not put on you, but it's something that was, kind of, that was placed on you. What's your plan with that? Like, I know you're going to school for psychology. Like, what's kind of, and you put out your book, and gave up your career so you could put this book out and start getting your not only your experiences out, but your perspective out. Like, kind of what's your game plan between with your new career and going into psychology? Like, what's at the end of the tunnel? Like, what are you seeing like as what you want to do with this, like in your life?
Yeah, so I've already started writing a second book, because I now understand, what I went through, why it happened to me, how I got there. And so I'm writing this book now that's just kind of like describing how I got to this point in my life, and kind of from early childhood until the events happened, kind of my worldview, what kind of psychological things I took and applied to my everyday life, and how I did that, so that others can do that,
Yeah.
Because there is so much of this that is psychologically based, and I think it all goes back to the brain and how it works.
Yeah.
And, we like to say that, within our society that there are, all kinds of worldviews, and that, nothing is black and white, and everything, there's all of this gray. but really, everything is black and white, right? Like in terms of math exists, right? Math exists, physics exists. 1 + 1 = 2. And so everything is really very cut and dry in terms of everything. And psychology is no different. The only reason it's different is because not many of us have reached this point. So not many of us see it from that perspective. But I can see very clearly that, there is a correct worldview. And I know that might be kind of controversial because everyone wants to have their politics, but there is a correct way to view the world and to view the people around you. And that's just it.
Yeah.
So I'm writing this book now to try and, whittle that down for people and kind of show them how to do what I did in my life to reach the conclusions that I did.
Yeah.
But, ultimately everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah.
And so what I want people to be able to do is to apply these things to their own life, in a way that will get them there, and that's why, when I'm talking about transformational experiences, they don't have to be these, giant revelatory experiences where you're suddenly awakened to the true nature of the universe. Ultimately, that's the goal. But throughout your life, you will have all kinds of smaller initiatory experiences where you change your mind and you change direction. And I want people to understand that always arises from a place of exhaustion. When you've been put through the ringer because you've been doing things wrong, and you finally admit to yourself that it was wrong, and so you move on, from a different perspective, and you try something new. And those are initiatory experiences within themselves, and I think they should be recognized as such. But people don't think of them that way,
Yeah.
And so that's basically my goal for the rest of my life, is to just try to get other people to where I am so that they know what I know,
Sure. So yeah, instead of prescribing meds, you're going to be like, read 3 chapters of the Kybalion and call me in the morning.
Yeah, I don't have anything against drugs. I don't use them, but I can see the dangers in using drugs because, one of the things that I looked at and one of the things that I was led to was this guy named Aleister Crowley. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Oh yeah, I know Crowley. Yep.
Yeah, but he was a famous occultist.
Yep.
And, he founded this religion based on the fact that he was using all of these drugs and hallucinating, and which I don't really think were hallucinations, but he was misinterpreting what he was being shown and what he was seeing. Yeah. And he created this whole religion based on that just does all kinds of weirdness and nonsense that you don't need to do. And it's just,
you talking about like the Golden Dawn stuff?
Yeah. And like Thelma and all that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, there's no reason to do any of that that I can see.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you just have the drugs and you've got nobody walking you through this, you're kind of in danger of winding up there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Is like, sometimes you need someone to kind of bring you through, and that's in ancient cultures you had like a shamanic type of presence, a person in your society that was their role, was to help bring you through some of those experiences. We're kind of missing that in today's world, the modern world. It's more like, all right, take these meds. But the problem is with anything like, take these meds, whether it is pharmaceuticals or whether it is psychedelics, like if you just become dependent on taking the meds to solve your problems, you're never going to put in the work you need to put in to actually, address the underlying issues.
Right.
Which becomes like which furthers the problem along, and it's probably why we get so many people dependent on, the pharmaceutical industry, it's why it's a $1 trillion industry or whatever, but, but yeah, man, I mean, this is a super interesting talk. And I can't wait to see the next book. I still got to finish this one. Like I said, I'm like somewhere between half and 3/4 through. I'm reading it on my Kindle, so it's hard to say exactly. I love having hard books or hard copies or physical copies of books, but I find the Kindle now I can have every book on one thing. You know what I mean? And it's But with the Kindle, it's just kind of hard, man. Like you can't flip through and see like where you are and stuff. But but whatever. But yeah, man, anything else before we wrap up? Like, this was an awesome talk. I know I want to urge people to go out, get your book. It's Matthew Roberts. It's called Initiated. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure there's a ton of other places you can get it if you don't want to support the Amazon machine. But how can people see more about you? Do you if you want to give out a website or your social media sites and stuff so people can check you out or find out more information?
Yeah, probably the easiest thing to do would just be to go to my Facebook page, Matthew Roberts UAP on Facebook, and you'll find me there. I've got all kinds of posts. That'll probably take you to my Twitter and everything else. So, yeah.
Perfect. And then, what would be, if you had to recommend, if someone was interested in learning more about like this whole process and, they feel like there's something more out there and they want to get started on this type of journey, like what would be your advice, like first step advice? I know it's probably hard. There's not a universal thing, but like, what would you say to someone like to get them kind of started on this path for themselves?
What I would recommend, honestly, is, so what I came to recognize is that this happens at a certain time of year. And it starts in the fall and it ends in the spring. So heading into fall, which is
kind of metaphorical for what the whole process is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because you got the death of everything that happens in the fall and the rebirth in the spring. Yeah. And that's kind of the whole mythologic, part of this. Yeah. What I would suggest, and one last thing too, I found it interesting that suicides increase at this time of year as well, because that's when depression becomes the most severe.
Yeah.
So that to me is kind of evidence that all of us are going through this, right? And I feel like if people were to maybe start picking up these books by the Yogi Publication Society and William Walker Atkinson, starting in the fall, that they would perhaps have these experiences. Because he wrote, like I said, 105 books on a myriad of topics. Some of them like what happens to you after you die, things like that. And often when I would have an experience, I would consult these books, and then I would find my answer in them as to what I had just experienced. And so they're an invaluable resource. Although it's not the kind of resource that people would normally think, because it's not, scientific, quote unquote, so to speak. It's more metaphysical and mysticism. But I, of course, just know that to be a natural part of the universe in which we live, and that's nothing to be afraid of. And so, yeah, just start reading these books by the Yogi Publication Society and see what happens. I bet a lot of people start to have experiences.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy and you got a ton going on, and we went a couple hours here on the phone. Didn't even seem like it, but yeah, man, thank you so much. And go check out his book, Matthew Roberts, Initiated.